It was the summer of 1984 when Robert Harris, a kind man in his early 40s, decided to take his 9-year-old daughter Lily on a special road trip. They lived in a quiet neighborhood in Texas, and Robert had just finished a long project at work. He wanted to reward himself and spend more time with Lily, who had just finished the school year with good grades. He told her they were going to drive across the state, stopping at small towns, parks, and fun attractions. Lily was very excited. She packed her pink backpack with snacks, a small notebook, and her favorite blue lunchbox. She couldn't wait to spend a whole week with her dad. Robert owned a red Cadillac that he had saved up for over many years. He kept it clean and shiny. He often said the car was more than just a car. It was part of their family. On the morning of the trip, neighbors saw Robert and Lily smiling as they packed the trunk and waved goodbye. They were headed west, planning to reach the mountains by the end of the week. Everything seemed perfect. Robert had planned their route carefully, marking every stop along the way. They were going to stay in motels, eat at local diners, and take pictures at each stop. Lily was holding a disposable camera and promised her mom she would take lots of photos. Her mother, Karen, stayed behind to work and take care of the house. She kissed him goodbye and told him to call every night. The first call came in as planned. Robert told her they had stopped in a town called Elmore, had lunch at a diner, and were now headed toward a nearby lake. Lily jumped on the line and said she saw a turtle by the water. Everything sounded good. But after that night, the call stopped. Karen waited the next evening by the phone, but nothing came. At first, she thought maybe they were just tired or out of service. But when another day passed without word, she began to worry. She called the police and reported them missing. Authorities began searching the route Robert had planned, but there were no signs of the car or either of them. It was like they had vanished. Flyers were posted across towns. Their photos were shown on local news. Karen drove the route herself, asking at gas stations and diners if anyone had seen a red Cadillac with a father and daughter. A few people said maybe they had seen them, but no one could be sure. Weeks passed, then months, and soon years. Karen never gave up. She believed they were still out there, maybe stranded or maybe someone had taken them. She hired private investigators, followed every lead, no matter how small. The red Cadillac was never found. It had simply disappeared from the face of the earth. Every year on Lily's birthday, Karen lit a candle and placed a photo on the dining table. She kept Lily's room exactly as it had been the day they left. School books, stuffed animals, and her blue lunchbox sat untouched. It was too painful to change anything. Friends told her to move on, but she couldn't. She just knew something had happened, something no one had discovered yet. In 2000, 16 years after Robert and Lily vanished, a man named Carlos was working at a large junkyard in Arizona. It was his job to help clear out old metal and crush vehicles. One morning, while moving a pile of metal with a large machine, he noticed something strange. Underneath layers of rusted parts was a crushed red vehicle, half buried in dirt. It looked like it had been there for many years. The shape was familiar, long front, boxy back. He brushed off more dirt and was shocked to see the faint outline of a Cadillac symbol. It wasn't just any car. This one looked like it had been crushed deliberately, not from an accident. The windows were gone, and the body was smashed nearly flat, but something about it made him pause. Carlos called over his supervisor and pointed out the car. The number on the license plate was hard to read, but part of it was still visible. They called the police to report the discovery. When the vehicle was finally pulled out from under the scrap pile, a few items fell out. A rusted pink backpack, a bent blue lunchbox. The police froze. They realized they might have just uncovered something tied to a mystery that had been cold for nearly 2 decades. When the crushed Cadillac was taken into custody by local authorities, the first thing they did was run the partial license plate. The letters and numbers were hard to read, but they matched part of a vehicle that had been reported missing many years ago. The number led them back to the original police report from 1984, the disappearance of Robert and Lily Harris. The news spread quickly. Local reporters came to the junkyard to take photos. The story was sent to the Texas Police Department that had handled the original case. Soon, the file was reopened and a cold case team was assigned to investigate the strange discovery. Karen Harris received a call she never expected to get. After 16 years of silence, someone was finally calling about her husband and daughter. Karen's hands shook as she held the phone. The officer told her that a red Cadillac had been found in a junkyard in Arizona, and it appeared to be the same car Robert had been driving. She barely spoke for a few seconds. Her mind tried to make sense of it. She had imagined 1,000 outcomes over the years. Kidnapping, robbery, even witness protection, but never this. She asked if they had found anything inside. The officer said the car was severely damaged, and most of its contents had rotted or rusted. But there were 2 items they were able to recover, a pink backpack and a blue lunchbox. Karen dropped to the floor. She knew those items. She had packed them herself a night before they left. The backpack had Lily's name stitched on it. It was her school bag, and the lunchbox had a sticker of a dolphin Lily had put on herself. Karen flew to Arizona. The next day, she met with detectives and was taken to see what was left of the car. Her heart sank when she saw the mangled metal, but the color and the shape brought back memories. She placed her hand on the door, which had been pulled free from the rest of the frame. Tears filled her eyes. This was the car. But where were Robert and Lily? There were no bones found inside the vehicle and no blood either. The car had been empty. Whoever had put it there had made sure nothing remained inside. It wasn't an accident. Someone had placed a Cadillac at the junkyard and made sure it would disappear under tons of scrap. The junkyard manager, an older man named Bert, was questioned. He said he'd owned the place since the late 80s but didn't remember a red Cadillac ever coming in. He explained that cars were often dropped off in the night, especially before they had cameras or proper records. Sometimes they were stolen vehicles, sometimes just junk. No one checked too closely back then. Detectives began to trace who owned the land before Bert. They found out that in 1984, the junkyard had belonged to a man named Dean Wallace, who had since passed away. Dean had a reputation for taking in cars with no questions asked. He was known to pay cash and keep no records. They also discovered that he had connections to a group suspected of transporting stolen vehicles and parts across state lines. The theory began to form. What if Robert and Lily had witnessed something they shouldn't have? What if they had stopped for gas or directions and ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time? It might explain why the car ended up where it did. But the biggest question remained, where were Robert and Lily? Karen refused to believe they were dead. She told the detectives about Robert's habit of writing things down. He always carried a small notebook in his pocket. He would record gas mileage, places they visited, even things Lily said that made him laugh. If the notebook survived, it might hold clues. Police searched through every piece of the car they could find. The glove compartment was smashed shut, and it took hours to pry it open. Inside, they found a few scraps of paper, barely readable. Most of it was damaged, but one sentence stood out in faded ink. Stopped near Pine Creek. Strange man with yellow truck. It wasn't much, but it was something. Pine Creek was a small area near the Arizona border, mostly forgotten, with only a few buildings still standing. Detectives decided to head there next. The drive to Pine Creek was quiet and heavy with thoughts. It was a remote place, a small patch of buildings surrounded by dirt roads and dry land. Time had not been kind to it. Most of the stores were shut down, windows boarded up, and weeds grew through cracks in the pavement. But the investigators didn't care about the state of the town. They were chasing a memory, a trail that had been cold for 16 years. Karen insisted on joining them. She sat in the back seat of the unmarked police vehicle, staring out the window, wondering if her husband and daughter had passed through the same road all those years ago. She kept thinking about that sentence in Robert's handwriting, strange man with yellow truck. That line played over and over in her mind like a broken song. When they arrived, the local sheriff's office gave them access to old property records. They wanted to find out if anyone in Pine Creek had owned a yellow truck in the mid-1980s. A name popped up, Franklin Miles. He had owned a gas station on the edge of town. He was never arrested for anything serious, but had several complaints against him. Fights, threats, and accusations of trying to scare travelers. According to the records, he passed away in 1993, but his property had remained untouched. The gas station was still there, covered in dust, its sign barely hanging on. The group decided to visit the station the next morning. When they arrived, the gas station was as creepy as they expected. The pumps were rusted and the doors were locked, but one of the windows was broken. Carefully, they stepped inside. The air smelled of rotten oil. Old newspapers were scattered across the floor, and a single yellow truck was parked behind the building, hidden by overgrown bushes. The truck had flat tires and no license plate, but it matched the description from Robert's note. They began to explore the building room by room. In a small back office, they found boxes of papers and receipts. Most of it had been destroyed by time, but one piece of paper caught the attention of Detective Moreno. It was a receipt for gas, dated June 21st, 1984. The name written on it in shaky handwriting was Harris. Karen gasped. That was the exact week Robert and Lily had gone missing. It was too exact to be a coincidence. They kept digging and found a small trapdoor in the back of the office. It was nailed shut, but not locked. Using a crowbar, the officers pried it open. A ladder led down into a dark basement. No one said a word as they slowly climbed down. The air was cold and thick. Flashlights lit up the space, showing concrete walls, old furniture, and strange markings on the walls. In one corner, there was a rusted bed frame, and nearby lay a doll missing an arm. Karen stepped closer, her breath trembling. She reached for the doll. It had Lily's name written on the tag. Tears poured down Karen's face. This was proof that Lily had been here. But what had happened to her? Was she kept down here? Had Robert tried to fight back? The basement was silent, holding on to its secrets. The team collected everything they could: photos, fingerprints, even the doll. The entire area was sealed off as a crime scene. Forensics arrived the next day to search for DNA and evidence. Slowly, pieces of the puzzle were coming together. They believed that Robert and Lily had stopped for gas, as planned. Something must have felt wrong, which made Robert write that note. Maybe Franklin Miles had threatened them. Maybe he had something to hide. Or maybe he was just cruel. But somehow, the encounter ended badly. Robert and Lily were taken, held in this basement. The question was for how long. Detectives found a small notebook in the corner of the room, hidden beneath the bed frame. It had water damage and mold, but some of the pages were still readable. It was Robert's handwriting again. He had written short messages. We're still here, trying to stay calm. Lily is scared. The last entry was dated July 2nd, 1984. After that, there was nothing. Karen clutched the notebook, her hands shaking. These were her husband's final words. She felt the pain and strength in every line. Her worst fears had come true, but at least now she had answers. They hadn't just vanished. Something terrible had happened. Now, all that remained was to find out where they had gone after that last entry, and who had helped cover it up. After the discovery in the basement of the old gas station, the investigation intensified. News of the breakthrough spread fast, and was soon all over television and newspapers. People from nearby towns called in with memories, stories, and tips, though most were old and difficult to verify. Still, every piece of information mattered. The cold case team reviewed every call carefully. One caller stood out, an elderly woman named Martha Jenkins. She lived in a trailer park just a few miles from Pine Creek. She told the officers that back in the summer of 1984, she remembered seeing a red Cadillac parked behind the gas station. She had always thought it was strange because the car stayed there for days, and then one day, it was just gone. She had even reported it to a deputy at the time, but no one followed up. Martha also remembered seeing a girl who looked scared through the back window of the station one evening, but when she came closer, the lights inside went off. The police never believed her. After all, she was just a lonely woman with no proof. Now, hearing that same Cadillac had been found crushed in a junkyard, she felt sick. Her memories were real. Officers thanked her and returned to the station site. They brought in ground-penetrating radar and searched the land around the station. A few days later, behind the building near an old oak tree, they discovered something buried. It was a shallow grave, covered with rocks and debris. Inside, they found 2 sets of bones. A DNA test confirmed what Karen already knew in her heart. It was Robert and Lily. The confirmation brought a strange mix of pain and peace. For 16 years, Karen had lived in a world of unanswered questions. She had imagined every kind of ending. Now she had one. It wasn't the ending she had hoped for, but at least the truth had come to light. The investigation into Franklin Miles was reopened. Even though he had died years earlier, they suspected he had not acted alone. Someone had helped him dispose of the car, bury the bodies, and cover up the crime. Eventually, through fingerprints found in the basement and on the vehicle, police linked another man to the crime, Ricky Barnes, a former mechanic who had worked at the Junkyard in the 80s. He had a criminal record, but had never been tied to any violent crimes before. Ricky was tracked down in New Mexico, where he was living under a different name. He was arrested and questioned. At first, he denied everything, but when shown photos of the crushed Cadillac and the doll with Lily's name on it, his story began to crumble. He eventually confessed. Franklin had lured the father and daughter into the gas station. When Robert saw something suspicious, perhaps an illegal deal happening, he threatened to call the police. Franklin panicked. He overpowered Robert and locked both of them in the basement. Ricky arrived later and helped Franklin bury the bodies and transport the car across the state. They crushed the Cadillac and dumped it under scrap to hide the evidence. Ricky said he was young and scared, but Karen didn't care. He had stolen her family's future. She made sure he was held accountable. The trial took place months later. Karen sat in the front row every day. The courtroom was silent as the details of the crime were read aloud. Pictures of the basement, the car, the recovered notebook, they all painted a heartbreaking picture. Ricky was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Justice had finally arrived, but the scars would remain. After the trial, Karen returned home. She placed Robert's notebook and Lily's doll on a shelf in her living room, next to a framed photo of the three of them taken on the morning of their road trip. She visited the small grave where they were buried side by side under a new headstone. It read, "Robert and Lily Harris, forever together, forever missed." Karen became an advocate for missing persons cases. She worked with families who had gone through similar pain. She shared her story, hoping it would help others never give up, no matter how long the silence lasted. The mystery of Robert and Lily's disappearance had haunted her for most of her life, but in the end, truth had found its way through rust, dirt, and time. What was once lost was finally found, and though it could not bring back the years they had missed, it gave her a path forward, holding on to love and memory as tightly as she once held Lily's tiny hand.